Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I am joined by author Josh Winning to talk about Burn the Negative and horror books featuring cursed objects. So, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm like the biggest fan of your podcast, so I'm just like thrilled to be here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Well, we had a thing we did over at Tales of Point Horror,
Yeah, the film club.
and we talked about the Blair Witch Project, and you gave us quite a fright.
Oh yeah. I felt like you kind of had someone had to do it, so I stepped up to the mark and I did a little prank.
I'm glad to see that you're okay. The Blair
I'm
Witch didn't
fine,
get you.
yeah. I made it out of the
Okay.
woods. It was fun. I loved doing that chat, and yeah, that one was a really, really fun one because that film is so iconic. The Blair Witch
Oh
Project,
my
so
gosh.
iconic. 1999. It's sort of like feels like a lifetime ago, and yet it's still so effective. So yeah, that was super fun to talk about.
It was. I rewatched it when we did that, and I could not believe how many parts of it still scared me. I mean, I love found footage as it is, but even just the locals just talking about the local lore and legends just really got under my skin. I was like,
It's
"Ugh."
so effective. Yeah, and it's sort of like it really is of another time in the sense that they just couldn't get out their iPhones and navigate their way out.
Mhm.
They had a paper map, and once the map was gone, they were completely fucked, which is terrifying, especially for us in
Yeah.
the present day with all our phones.
It was such a film for its time because it was like the last time you could make a movie without people having that technology to rely on, and then the marketing and the way that they were able to push the narrative that the actors had disappeared. Like there's no other point in time where you could do that. Like they still took advantage of what internet was there, but there
Yeah,
wasn't enough to like really research into it. Like it was just like it came at the perfect time.
yeah, it really did. Absolutely.
But you released a book called Burn the Negative. So tell us a bit about that.
Okay, I'm going to lead with the cursed object because that's what we're here for. The cursed object in Burn the Negative is a film called The Guest House, which is a 1993 horror movie about a cursed guest house, which is haunted by a figure known as the Neil Man, who is kind of like a Babadook, Freddy Krueger, Count Olaf style boogeyman, who kills people in creative ways. He very much keeps in the shadows, this kind of spectral, spooky figure. And within the story of the film, he kind of talks to 7-year-old Polly Tremaine, who is the daughter of the owner of the guest house, and she predicts how people in the guest house are going to die by using this little paper fortune teller that she has. So that's like the fake film within the book, and within the narrative of the book, the film became like a cult hit because pretty much everybody involved in the film died in ways that really spookily mirrored what actually happens in the film itself.
Mhm.
And one of the only survivors was the star, 7-year-old Polly Tremaine. Sorry, I've got the names completely mixed up. The girl in the film is called Tammy Manners. She's played by Polly Tremaine, and she may have escaped this curse, supposed curse, because maybe it's not real. Also, her family uprooted from Hollywood, moved over to England, started a new life. She changed her name, she changed her appearance. She grew up completely out of the spotlight, but still with um, this supposed curse hanging over her,
Mhm.
and all these people that she knew from the movie industry who died. So she's now. So this is getting very long-winded. There's a lot of backstory to all this. um, but she's now a grown-up. She's a journalist, 30-year-old journalist. She's named Laura Warren, and she writes for like an entertainment magazine called Zeppelin. And she is sent by her boss to Los Angeles. It's her first time back there in 30 years. She didn't want to go. She's basically been forced to go. And she's been sent to visit the set of the new horror streaming series called It Feeds. And on the way there, she discovers that It Feeds is actually a remake of The Guest House. And when she arrives, people start to die all over again. It's kind of like a Russian doll type story, like a curse within a curse. Like, is there a curse? Is there not a curse? Is Laura the one who's cursed, or is it the film? Um, so yeah, hopefully it's like a fun, twisty, sort of self-aware mystery.
I had so much fun with it. I think there's a lot for readers to grab onto, and I love the story within the story, but also the interstitial articles and like coverage and blog posts about this like movie. Like if this movie existed, this is how people would write about it. These are the articles you would see on these are the Reddit posts you would see and like where are they now? And I felt like it was really a book for horror lovers in a lot of way, horror movie fans. I think especially as they're getting through certain parts where they're like in cursed object movies like you do, you're trying to figure out what it is and like trying to figure out like is there a pattern, what's going on here? And it kind of felt like a Randy in Scream 2 moment when it's like this is a remake, the rules are different.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I love Scream. Scream is like my turning point moment in my life, I think, where I was young enough for it to just completely imprint on me, as this sort of like really cool, scary, self-aware film about films and film that sort of dissected films. And I think the sequels just took that idea and ran with it. You know, Scream 2, I love that they have the universe of Stab that they introduce, which is the film within the
Mhm.
film. Um, and I've always loved that kind of meta type of storytelling. Like I think it goes back to like the never ending story, where that's a story about a story, very sort of deep and meaningful and sort of like philosophically emotionally rich, but it's for kids and it's
Mhm.
really quite grown up in what it's saying and what it's doing. So yeah, with Burn the Negative, I did want to essentially do like a bit of a Scream in the sense of it's for horror fans by a horror fan. We
Yeah.
I know what you've watched last summer, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
um, and to have fun with it.
Yeah, and it definitely was. I wanted to ask how it felt to write a character in your line of work.
Yeah, it was like really liberating and kind of therapeutic because I could say a lot of the things I wanted to say and just like I didn't say it, Laura said it. Um,
Just an it's a simple observation that she
oh
made
yeah,
that
no
I maybe have
judgment.
thought to myself a few times.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I definitely thought about the things that because Laura is because of her background and what happened to her, and this fact that she's like denying the curse, she's denying her previous identity. She's become quite a cynical kind of person. Um, so I was kind of thinking about things that really annoyed me about magazine journalism or about the film industry, or the way
Yeah.
that those two things intersect, and amplified those for Laura to experience. And so that kind of I could sneak in my own little observations about the
Yeah.
journalism industry and um, like when I talk about how everything's really done really last minute, you know, Laura hasn't even read the press release when she got on the plane because it was sent like
Yeah.
10 minutes beforehand, that kind of thing that is quite irritating as a journalist.
Oh, so that's true to life.
Oh, completely. Yeah, everything
Oh
is
my
so
gosh.
last minute. Like you might get offered, so you might get your editor emailing you and saying, you know, there's a trip to LA in a couple of weeks' time. Do you fancy it? And you obviously say, yes, please. Thank you very much. I'd love to do that. But then you might not hear anything for like another week or two. And you're thinking, is this going to happen?
And you're
Um,
just expected to like go with it when they
yeah,
say, here's your itinerary. Go for it."
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And
Oh.
sometimes you get an itinerary for the trip and sometimes you don't and you kind of get it when you arrive. But yeah, I don't,
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to like rag too much on everyone's overworked and it is a very
Yeah.
busy, stressful environment. But there are things like that I've experienced a lot.
And I'm sure you brought that experience into writing the articles too.
Yeah, I'd done that on my previous book, The Shadow Glass, which is sort of a love letter to 80s fantasy films. And when I was writing that book, that's when I started to play around with this idea of doing found documents. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it was partly inspired by Paul Tremblay's book, A Head Full of Ghosts, because
Oh,
that
yeah.
book has these. I dream of being able to write as well as Paul Tremblay, like those interstitials that he has that are blog posts that are sort of
Mhm.
analyzing. Um, it's been a while since I read it, but is it analyzing the TV series that
Yeah.
investigated the
Yep.
supposed possession?
Mhm.
Um, they were. I think I even put in my notes for Shadow Glass. Write articles that are like Head Full of Ghosts. You know? um, so I'm not doing anything original. It's all Paul Tremblay's fault. Um, but it turned out like to be a really fun exercise. At first, it was like
Yeah.
kind of. At first, I thought it would be freeing because I could just make up whatever I wanted. But then I kind of realized sometimes it's easier when you have an actor or a director giving you quotes that you can turn into an article rather than actually coming up the quotes completely yourself.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as a reader, I always think those are really fun and really ground you in the setting of the world.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it hopefully makes you, not only does it sort of info dump in a way that's fun rather than
Yeah.
weighing down the chapters themselves, it also makes you feel like you have observed this cultural
Mhm.
moment yourself through all the media that
Yeah.
you do actually sort of absorb or eat, whatever. Anyway,
Take it
words
in,
fail me
yeah.
sometimes.
Well, as someone who works in the entertainment industry, what do you think about it makes for a good cursed object, just cursed story?
There are so many reasons. I think Hollywood itself is fascinating because it plays by its own rules. It has its own logic, its own mythology. You can almost believe that everybody in Hollywood already believes in curses. Like I'm thinking about things like when a movie flops, the
Mhm.
star becomes often they're held responsible. They become
Mhm.
exiled or they become sort of like don't touch them. You know, everything they touch turns to sand. Somehow they're the reason the film bombed rather than the hundreds of other people that were involved in the making of the film. And then when a film is a hit, the star is like the next messiah. Like they literally can take a project from development hell to greenlit within a day. So there's like a funny sort of
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, wonky bonkers thing that happens in Hollywood where everyone sort of believes in this intangible force that is somehow working in and around them anyway. And then if you add a curse narrative on top of that, it just sort of like feels like a natural extension of what's happening anyway.
Hollywood has its own kind of superstitiousness.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I can't. I was talking to I was on Talking Scared podcast, and he asked me if there were any superstitions that I'd noticed on set, and I couldn't actually remember any, which is really annoying because I'm sure there are loads. Um, but yeah, it's like this whole industry built around storytelling. This whole industry that is
Mhm.
obsessed with finding the next great story or the next big hook. Like it's a monster movie, but you've got to be really quiet, or the monster will get you, or like it's Jaws, but it's in space. You know, all those great
Yeah.
things. But it's also really cutthroat as well.
Yeah.
So there's that lovely creative side, but there's also that paranoia-inducing savagery to it as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty merciless industry.
Yeah. Yeah, you're either hot shit or you're dog shit. I think there's very little in between.
Well, how do you think you'd react if you came across a cursed object or you found out you were in possession of a cursed object?
That's a really good question because, funnily enough, we have a potential cursed object in our house right now.
No. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
what?
it's we moved into our house about 7 months ago, and we noticed that underneath the stairs, there's like a weird little alcove that sort of it's underneath the first two steps. It's like almost like an unfinished bit of cupboard, but it's not part of the actual cupboard under the stairs. It's like a weird alcove that
Hmm.
serves no purpose whatsoever, except for sometimes the cat goes in there to sort of be spooky or whatever. Even before we moved in, when we first looked around the house, we noticed that there was a child's shoe in that hole under the stairs. It's like a pink,
Ominous.
yeah, like a pink sort of sandal. You know those ones that you can buy plastic, um, like models of flowers or dinosaurs or whatever, and stick them in the shoe, like a jelly shoe.
Hmm.
It's one of
Yeah.
those, and it's under the stairs. And every once in a while, me and my boyfriend sort of look at it, and neither of us are really
You haven't moved it, you
superstitious.
just leave it?
No, neither of us are superstitious, but neither of us have moved it. So, he said to me the other day, "Have you moved the shoe?" Because the shoe had moved, and I was like, "I haven't. I'm not going near it. I haven't touched
No.
it." So even though we don't really believe in
Maybe
that
maybe
stuff,
it was the cat.
it was definitely the cat. That's what I'm telling myself to be able to sleep at night. Yeah,
It was definitely the cat.
it has to be. It has to be. Well, it kind of made me think about what makes that kind of thing scary. It's like it's just a shoe. It's just a shoe under the stairs. I think probably what we'll maybe discover as we're talking about specific cursed objects in books and movies and stuff is that it's more about what those objects say about people, maybe like the mystery of who the owner was and why the shoe was put there. And it's like that one shoe can come to
Mhm.
represent so much horror and pain that a real person could have endured,
Yeah,
hopefully didn't endure.
yeah.
But there's that fear, like that self preservation thing where you go, if I don't touch it, I'm not going to experience that same horror and pain that that person may have experienced.
And it's also, yeah, like, why just one?
Why one?
Where is its pair?
Yeah. Is there
How did it
someone
end up
walking around
there?
with one shoe? Like a little ghost child wearing one shoe, just crying?
And she's not gonna be happy until she has her other shoe, that's her
I know.
unfinished business.
There is a
She's
presence.
haunting the walls. She's haunting the walls asking for her shoe.
No. The thing is, this house is over 130 years old, so
Oh, wow.
it's just a matter of time.
If you hear any uneven, like, thwack, thwack.
We heard some creepy noises in the chimney, but we think it was just stuff falling down the chimney. But you don't
Possibly.
know.
Sure you don't. Well, should we talk about some movies that feature cursed objects?
Yes, yes, there are so many.
There are.
When you start to think about it, it's like there are like massively disproportionately amount of films about cursed stuff than there are books, I think. It's like a weird phenomenon in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, because there's the whole Annabelle franchise within the, like, Conjuring universe, and that's, like,
Yeah,
3-ish movies right there, and then I
yeah.
guess whenever it connects to other things. I'm not a big Conjuring universe head. I've seen all the Annabelle movies. I think Creation was my favorite.
I was going to say which one's your favorite. That
Yeah,
is mine too.
good.
It's so good. Because that was the guy who did Lights Out, I think, David F. Sandberg, and he's like really good. I really like him.
It was very different, to I guess the lore that was established in the first Annabelle, right? Like, it
Yeah,
was a very different story, and it went a completely different way with it, but I really liked it, and I thought it was very effective. And then I think it's Annabelle Comes Home, and then I think the original Annabelle is the bottom for me.
yeah,
That's my
yeah.
ranking.
I haven't seen Annabelle Comes Home because I feel like I don't know. I'm interested to watch it, but sometimes when a film peaks or a franchise feels like it peaks, I'm a bit like, oh, I've seen the best version of this. I'm done.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not watching Annabelle Comes Home is not changing anything.
There was one that I
Uh,
saw just this last week that I loved. And I keep wanting to call it Talk to the Hand, but it's not called Talk to the Hand. It's called Talk to Me.
to be fair, all the promos and stuff, it's the big hand. So
Yeah,
it's got 90s attitude. Talk to the
it
hand.
really has. Have you seen it?
I haven't yet. I've heard such good things though.
I loved it. It's a great cursed object. It's like the mythology of it. It's like a dead psychic medium's hand that has been encased in sort of porcelain. And if you touch it,
Oh.
you can see the dead, and the dead can talk through you.
I
Yeah.
know I saw the trailer where it looks like it's a teen party and they're like daring each other to like hold the hand. I absolutely would not. Like I don't consider myself superstitious, but I feel like I'm just like cautious.
Yeah. You're
Would
sensible. Like,
you? Would
don't
you hold
mess.
it?
No. Hell no.
Well, now you've seen the movie, you know how it goes for them.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a really creepy looking hand. So you don't want to go near that.
Even
No,
like the worst high school peer pressure, I don't know that I would.
no. I did a Ouija board when I was sort of 10 maybe, but
Mhm.
it wasn't like a proper, I've forgotten what the real name for it is. But I think we just drew it on a bit of paper because you can kind of make your own Ouija board.
Yeah.
And I remember that I asked the spirits the name of my dead cat who had passed away a couple of years ago, and it started to spell the name out. And I went like white, and I'd completely freaked out. But one of my best friend at the time was also playing, so I think he knew that
Mm,
name.
yeah. It's a possibility.
Yeah, yeah. I still know him. I really should ask him if he remembers pushing the glass.
It's a confrontation that needs to happen. We need these
Yeah.
answers. I rewatched The Ring for this episode, and I forgot how much I love that movie. I think that's one of my favorite remakes.
Yeah. It's
I think it's
really
a top
good.
tier.
Yeah. I think that the Japanese original is fantastic, but
Mhm.
it can feel a bit like dry, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I think the remake really amps it up and makes it like gothic in the best way.
It does, and I think it really benefits from that moody 2000s, like, blue-green filter that we put on
Yeah.
everything at that time. It just really fits that aesthetic.
Yeah. That's the Matrix. I feel like the Matrix came along and everyone
It
put
was
a
that the
blue-green
first
filter.
one?
Yeah, I swear it
Because then it's
was.
everywhere, like, the Saw movies, like, the first few are, like, all blue-green. I was
Yeah.
just talking to Nat, Midnight Meat Train is, like, that blue-green, like, it was just how we viewed
Yeah,
things
that
at
was
that
horror.
time.
Even like X-Men
Yeah.
did it as well.
Yeah.
It got
You're right,
everywhere.
it's like I have not gone on with the other movies in the Ring franchise. Have you?
I saw I watched all three of the Japanese Ringu in at university, so that's like years ago now. And I liked Ring 2 because I think that like there's a tradition of having a sequel set in a hospital, so I quite enjoyed that they did that. But then Ring Zero Birthday is the prequel, and I just found that
Okay.
really boring. I'm not sure if I even finished it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like
Interesting.
all about Sadako's origin, and I didn't
Huh.
need it.
Not into it.
No,
One that I watched for this episode was In Fabric. It was an A24 movie.
I've never seen that.
It's about a cursed dress. Yeah.
Ah,
It's like a red dress and you're
of
following
course.
like these different women that have it and how it like ruins their lives.
Ooh, was it good?
It was good. It was very weird. Like there were several times I was watching it like, what? What is happening right now? But I don't know. It's A24, so it has that artsy style, but it is a little slower of a burn and it gets odd. Like there's just like odd interactions where you're like, what?
Ah, like sort of art housey conversations.
Yeah. Mhm.
Does
Yeah.
the dress like what does it do? Does it strangle them, or is it just bad luck befalls them?
Both. Like some I think Gwendolyn Christie gets strangled by the dress.
Oh,
But then like someone gets like bit by a dog while wearing it, like it causes a car accident. It's just like a
oh,
real evil dress.
yeah. I think I prefer it if it was just the dress killing them, like strangling them, or like I think that's probably, I don't know. I've not seen it, so I can't talk about it. Have you
Um,
seen Drag Me to Hell?
I haven't. So what is the
Oh,
cursed object in that? I
it's a
started it and then I got distracted and I didn't
oh my
finish
god,
it.
go back to it. It's one of my
I
absolute
will.
favorites. Yeah. And like if I tell you what the cursed object is, it doesn't sound that scary because it's a button.
I just told you about a cursed red dress, so go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. But it's a button, and the premise is
Like a
that
clothes button?
y-
Like a
uh,
clothing?
yeah, like it comes off her coat, I think.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it does work really well, and by the end of the film, you are terrified of this button. um, but it's oh, I can never remember her name. I love her. It's not. Is it Alison Pill? No, I always get them confused. Anyway, there's the main character. She's like a loan advisor in a bank,
Mhm.
and she's trying to get a promotion. So she's trying to impress her boss, and then a Romani woman comes into the bank asking for a loan, and in order to prove to her boss that she has some grit, she turns Mrs. Garnish down, and Mrs. Garnish curses her. She rips the button off her coat and she curses her, and it's very spooky. And then it's a bit like Ring, I think, where she kind of has a set amount of time before she gets dragged to hell by the button.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
I know like that's one people talk about all the time, so I need to just
yeah,
watch it. I mean, tangential to that, there's also like the Evil Dead
yes.
franchise with the
Same
book.
director,
Yep.
Sam Raimi. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He loves a
He loves a
cursed
cursed
thing.
object.
Yeah. He's quite good on like quirky, sort of tongue-in-cheek comedy horror. And I think maybe
Mhm.
cursed objects lend themselves quite well to that because there is that whole sense of sort of, oh, don't be so stupid. It's not cursed, it's just a button.
There's also a lot of franchise potential. I'm looking at our list, and all of these have spawned several. It's like you have Hellraiser with the Lament configuration, you have the Annabelle franchise, the Ring franchise, the Evil Dead franchise, Child's Play, Wishmaster. It's kind of like that lamp
Yes.
that he comes out of, right? Like that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, totally. I think that's why Talk to Me really impressed me because it introduced a new, really iconic cursed object that had such franchise potential to it,
Yeah,
which is quite
it did.
difficult to do. But when they do it, look at it go.
Also, Oculus, the mirror.
I still haven't seen that, and I don't know why. There's a spooky mirror.
Really? It is, and it's about to be sold. It's like this antique and this brother and sister, like this mirror was like their downfall. It is the reason her brother was in jail, like their parents died, so they have like beef with this mirror. She wants to like set things right. She wants to get it on camera and like prove that her brother was innocent and prove that it's like this mirror that did it, but it like
Mm,
distorts your reality and it like outsmarts the technology. It's creepy.
mm. That's the film where it was before Mike Flanagan became Mike Flanagan, wasn't it? It was like one of his
Yeah.
first films.
Yeah, it was an early one for him, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks really cool, and it's got Karen Gillan in it, hasn't it?
Mhm, mhm.
And she's great. I love her. So yeah, well, I will
Yeah.
definitely watch that. We don't really have many mirrors in our house, so maybe that's a safe one to watch.
You'll be side-eyeing, like, your bathroom mirror.
Oh yeah. Oh, actually, there's a lot of mirrors in the bathroom.
Did you have any other movies to mention? We didn't talk about, Dorian Gray, but we could I don't know if you wanted to talk about that
Oh
here
yeah.
or after the books.
Yeah, I really love Dorian Gray. I haven't read the book in a while. I tried to read it in time for this, but I just ran out of time. But I love the book, and I really liked the film with Ben Barnes as well from 2009. I thought he was great because I loved that they actually made him kind of bisexual in it. It wasn't just he was going after women. Obviously the book was written by Oscar Wilde, so he's got a massive
Yeah.
sort of queer. He's got queerness running through his stories, so I loved that the
Yeah.
film didn't shy away from that. Is that gets a
Yeah.
massive tick from me.
I don't think I've seen that adaptation.
Yeah, I thought it was solid.
This episode is brought to you by Fangoria, the world's best horror and cult film magazine since 1979. Listeners can use code BOOKSINTHEFreezer to get 20% off their order. That includes, of course, merchandise and first-time subscriptions and single issues of the magazine. Not only are there tons of articles and interviews about upcoming horror movies, there's a regular segment by Stephen Graham Jones all about slashers called Slasher Nation, so you're going to want a copy. So again, that is code BOOKSINTHEFreezer, and thank you, Fangoria, for supporting the show.
Are we ready to talk about some books?
Let's do it.
I am starting off with Gothic by Philip Fracassi. I think this came out this year, but this is a haunted desk, a cursed writing desk.
I love it. Tell me more.
Sure, this is about I wrote washed up writer, and I feel like that seems mean now, but this is kind of like
They exist.
Stephen King-esque writer who, had really big success as a horror writer and has not been able to get that success recently. But they're still like well regarded. They still have like a great reputation. He's gifted an antique writing desk by his girlfriend. And what he doesn't know is that across the ocean, there's a mysterious woman who will do whatever it takes to get her hands on that artifact. Her family has been searching for it for generations. But the desk is making Tyson act odd, even violent. And the new stuff he's writing is dark and disturbing. But his publisher is thrilled. And Tyson
Yeah.
likes all the success and he'll do anything to hold on to it. Anything.
Oh, that sounds good. I love that. So the desk is like influencing his writing.
It does. There was also some like really wild moments of body horror where the desk acts out
Oh,
the people that are trying to stop it. And I know that sounds wild, me saying that, but I was like, oh, okay. I mentioned this was released this year, but the feel of this book is very vintage, like pulpy horror story. It had like that kind of a feel. Like if I would have read it and you told me this book was published in like the 70s, 80s, I would have believed you. Like
that's
aside
cool.
from technology being mentioned. But it was pretty fun. Like I said, pretty effective, like horrifying scenes, and then like the stuff he's writing and how it's influencing him and like ruining his life and breaking down his relationships. And you also have like the lore of like what this desk was and where it came from and why this woman is searching for it. So that was a good time to read about a haunted desk. And the book is
Yeah.
called Gothic, and that is by Philip Fracassi.
It sounds so good. I love that. I love the I think the most effective horror stories take something that's really familiar, like something that everyone has in their house, and then
Hmm.
makes it scary. And like, can you imagine how many people have a desk in their house and they'll be sitting there
Yeah.
reading the book, looking at that desk in a way that they've never looked at a desk before?
Ew.
Yeah, I'm sitting at a desk right now.
I know, I'm like, funny you should mention that. I am
Yeah,
at one
yeah.
right now.
What if the drawer just suddenly opened and sort of, lured your hat? I don't know, lured. What happens in the book? Yeah.
It has like carvings in it and all kinds of stuff.
Oh. My first pick is it's called The Perfume by Caroline B. Cooney, and it's you guys had these, but I think maybe you called them point, but we in the UK call them point horror. Is that right?
Okay, yeah.
So it's a point horror. So it's a book for teens from 1992. Um, and so Caroline B. Cooney, she wrote some of the more ambiguous and kind of poetic point horror books. Um,
Really? I
yeah.
only know her from The Face on the Milk Carton, and I was obsessed with those books. So tell me everything.
Oh,
Right.
okay. I want to hear about that because I don't know about that. So
Oh,
Yeah. But yeah, her emphasis is sort of more on atmosphere and less on plot, at least in the point horror books that I've read of hers, like The Cheerleader. She did like a vampire trilogy. There was The Cheerleader was book two. The Vampire's Promise was the first one. I remember feeling as a teenager like I was reading something really grown up because they were just so creepy and they didn't sort of they didn't really specify really explicitly exactly what was happening. It was more about the atmosphere and what you thought was happening. Um, but the perfume, I just love how 90s it is. It's just like the plot is that Dove, she's called Dove, which to begin with is just fantastic. She's just sort of like your average teenager. She's not particularly cool. She's a bit shy and grey. Um, she's got a couple of friends. Her parents are super busy, always working. She lives in a condo that's just like really, it's like a really boring, bland kind of version of America. But her friends drag her to this shop at the mall called Dry Ice. Does it get more 90s than Dry Ice? And it's a perfume shop. And Dove hates perfume, but her friends can't just keep going on about this perfume called Venom, which apparently is just like the most amazing smell ever. And Dove smells it, loves it, or kind of ends up buying it. But it awakens this voice in her head that calls itself Wing, because Dove Wing, and it's never really clear, but it's kind of suggested that either Wing basically tries to ruin her life from the inside, but it's never really clear if Wing is that I've forgotten what the medical term is, but when you have a twin in utero, but the twin gets absorbed into one of the other twins. There's a
I
term
don't
for
know
it.
the medical term for that,
Okay,
but I'm
well,
aware of the phenomenon.
okay, cool. Well, apparently this happened to Dove, and she absorbed her
Okay.
twin in the womb, and so there's a suggestion that Wing is actually this twin's finally getting freedom, and she takes over Dove's body and all that kind of stuff. But there's also a suggestion that it may be like an ancient evil, like the perfume bottle is cursed, the smell of it is cursed. It summons like an ancient Egyptian phantom. There's lots of pyramid imagery in the book, particularly at the mall. And it's never really made clear what it is. It's kind of left up to the reader to decide. And but the thing that I just love about it, I don't know if you experience this as well, but I feel like it was a kind of a global phenomenon. But just the idea of perfume in the 90s and how it was so hip and cool to smell like a pop star. Like there was Britney Spears had a perfume.
I used to wear Paris Hilton.
Oh my god. Of all
And
the
I loved
people. And did you enjoy it?
I did. I loved it. It's a very nostalgic smell for me. But yeah, that was the heyday of like the celebrity perfume line.
It's so funny because it's like of all the things that you could envy or admire about a celebrity, like with Britney, it could be her voice, it could be her hair, it could be her abs, it could be the way that she dances with a snake. But do you actually want to smell like her? And does she wear her own perfume? Like, does she actually smell like Britney, or does she smell like Number Five or Calvin Klein? It's just
Yeah.
it's intriguing to me. And it's kind of, I think they still do it. Like, there's Kardashian perfume,
Yeah.
surely.
I was just at Sephora and I saw like Ariana Grande perfume and I had the thought, I'm like, oh, are we still doing this? Are we still
Yeah,
doing like celebrity perfumes? I didn't know
it's so
that.
retro.
Oh, but I was telling you the Face on the Milk Carton
Oh,
books,
yes.
they were I read them when I was like 11, but it's about this girl and one day she sees the missing child listing on the milk carton and it's her. And she
Ooh.
starts to think that her family now took her when she was a child.
Oh my God. That's a
It's a whole
great
thing.
idea. And so that's the whole series is about that.
At least the first one. I know there's more, and I don't remember what the sequels get into as much, but that's definitely what the first one is about.
Yeah, that sounds great. But that sounds really different to her point horror
Yeah,
books.
it sounds like it.
Yeah,
She's like
that sounds more
leaning into
like
ambiguity.
Babysitter Club meets Nancy Drew.
Yeah, and I mean, I was 11, so it's kind of the
Yeah,
vibe I
no,
was
that's
going
great.
for.
Yeah, 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 totally.
Oh, I forgot to rate Gothic, but I would put it in the fridge. There's some like I mentioned, horrifying, gnarly scenes of body horror. What
Yeah.
would you rate Perfume?
I think it doesn't even need to go in the fridge. I think it can quite happily sit, out in the air. It's like basically like a very safe point horror version of the Brady Bunch movie. You know how Jan hears her voice talking to her, like "Don't do that, Jan," that kind of stuff. Like that. This book has a lot of thinking. Wing thinking at Dove, Dove thinking at Wing, um, and then kind of threats not really being carried out. So yeah, it's definitely a room temperature kind of job.
All right, well, my next pick is also a release from this year. Okay, I had mentioned before that 2023 was the year of the vampire, but I think also a lot of really good like cursed object stories. So you have Burn the Negative, you have Gothic, Silver Nitrate, Cynthia Pelayo's The Shoemaker's Magician, Schrader's Court, which is still on my shelf to read, but like, wow,
It's
this is a
it's
moment
so
in
funny how
time.
that happens.
Yeah.
It's almost like a cursed book moment. I love it.
Yeah. So my next pick is Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and we are talking about cursed. I put cursed film reel, but I don't know if that's different from like silver nitrate, if that's like the terminology I should be using. It's cursed
Oh
silver
yeah.
nitrate. But this is about Montserrat, who is a talented sound editor in Mexico City. Her friend and longtime crush tells her his new neighbor, or his neighbor in his new apartment, is a cult horror director. And they meet up with him, and this cult director tells them that he has silver nitrate that's cursed by a Nazi occultist. He believes the reason for the curse is that the film was never finished. So Montserrat and Tristan help him finish the movie. They decide to help, but they notice they are being followed, and there may have been more to the story than they initially believed. And it does have one of my favorite tropes that is in cursed object stories where it's like, no, 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 this is what it is. And the way we fix it is by doing this. And it's like, no, what you did is just made it much worse. Like you unleashed whatever was holding it out
Oh yeah.
into the world.
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite things. So yeah, like this man tells him like, oh, the reason it's doing this is just that it was never finished. I just need you guys to watch it and do the voiceover, and once we do that, it'll be complete, and then it'll be done.
Yeah,
No.
just like in Casper when they like their unfinished business is finished, they go and they're happy. The film can just
Sure.
float off on a cloud.
All our success will just come back to us.
Yeah. I love that. I love that reasoning. That's great. Let's just
I
finish the
do.
film.
That's the only reason, is like there was things preventing it from being done, and now everyone's cursed, but simply this is the solution. Um, I really liked the story. I liked Montserrat as a character, and I think with all Sylvia Moreno Garcia stories, she is so knowledgeable about what she's writing. Like I felt like I got a lesson in like film history and how to handle like silver nitrate and like all the things that can go wrong with it. And I had mentioned before when she did her like masters, she like wrote about eugenics, so she's like bringing that in with this like Nazi occultism angle. Like I'm like, okay, she like knows what she is talking about.
Oh
um
yeah.
but also just like fun to learn about like being a sound editor in Mexico City. I just really liked it. I would put it between room temperature and fridge. It was a very well told story. It was very enjoyable, and I had a good time with it. I still need to read The Shoemaker's Magician, which I think also has like a cursed film plot to it.
Yeah.
By Cynthia Pelayo. That's on my to read list.
Oh
But
cool.
this was Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've not read that yet. I think she is fantastic.
Mhm.
I loved Mexican Gothic so much. I just inhaled that book. So yeah, I can't wait for Silver Nitrate. Bring it on.
Bring it.
Bring it
Unleash the
on.
evil into the world.
Yeah. Give us your Nazi occultism now. So my second book is The Blackstone Chronicles by John Saul. And this one was published as 6 novellas in 96 and 97. And weirdly, like all the books I'm talking about are from the 90s. I don't know why. Maybe that was like the last time there was a cursed film boom was in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's 2023.
Yeah. Just like that. So it's set in the town of Blackstone, New Hampshire, which is where an old asylum is about to be demolished to make way for what else? A new mall. But the demolition stirs up a dark presence in the town. So each novella is named after the cursed object that is gifted to a character by a shadowy, mysterious figure who stalks the asylum, this desolate, empty asylum. So there's a doll, naturally. There's a locket, like a necklace with a clasp. There's a lighter that's shaped like a dragon. There's a handkerchief, and there's a stereoscope, which is one of those like old-fashioned. It looks like a binocular, but I think you can put pictures inside to have a look. It's like a very old-fashioned way of looking at a photograph, is what I understood from that. And yeah, so each novella tells a complete story, but the characters cross over between the stories, and there's an overarching plot involving a journalist called Oliver Metcalf, who's the editor of the local newspaper, and he has his own traumatic past linked to the asylum. So it's a really cool way of doing this. If it's like if you
Yeah.
want cursed objects, you're gonna get them. Each novella is very specifically titled after a cursed object and focuses on that pretty much exclusively. And in the introduction, John Saul says that he was inspired by Stephen King's The Green Mile and the way that you could tell a serialized story over like a series of,
Mhm.
of novellas like that. And Oliver Metcalf, the journalist in the book, he is kind of like the most Kingsian character because he has these like blinding headaches that come out of nowhere, and then he has visions, which is quite a King kind of thing to do.
Yeah.
Had you ever heard of John Saul?
I I actually think I might have read a few of
Oh,
these,
cool.
but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I
But
completely
when you
missed
said
him.
things, I'm like, I kind of remember that. Okay, I'm like, the doll sounds I'm like, that's right, they were building a mall. Like, I'm just like, the things are getting pieced back.
Yeah, the doll one is probably my favorite. Like, it's definitely because it's the first one, and it goes in hard, and it's creepy and upsetting, um,
Mhm.
and like I really like the way that John Saul um, illustrates the history of each object before the story starts. So you get this flashback to the origin story of the object before it enters the lives of one of the townspeople, and it's really effective because it just absolutely crams the object full of emotion and trauma and sort of dark history,
Yeah.
and it therefore that whatever that character went through when they had that object, it then manifests in the life of the person who is gifted that object. And it's really like there's a little girl who pretty much kills her pregnant mother because she finds out that she's going to have a baby brother and not a baby sister, and so that's why she wants the doll, because the doll is a girl. And that's like seriously disturbing.
It's a little
um,
dark.
Really dark. There's an elderly woman who gets crushed by a sort of an ornate old elevator. Pretty horrific. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, there's like a real sense of tragedy and impending doom as the stories go by, where you're just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, like this is what's going to happen. It's going to really fuck this town up.
They should have never built that mall. Should have just let it
No,
rest.
absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah, like, but for me, the big reveal at the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but it didn't quite work for me. Um, I think it was effective, but I'm not like 100% sure on exactly how it all fitted together, but that might just be me. Maybe I was too scared. I wasn't paying enough attention. I think I would put it in the freezer because there is some really upsetting stuff. And there was
Okay.
some of the writing is really spooky. It's like very atmospheric. And yeah, the way that it invokes that emotional history for these objects is just really effective. So yeah, I probably would put it in the freezer. That's the Blackstone Chronicles by John Saul.
Okay, my final pick. I went pretty literal.
That's what comes up when you Google cursed objects. That's all that comes up.
This is the book Cursed Objects. Strange but true stories of the world's most infamous items by J.W. Oker. I really like these. He also released a book, I want to say last year, about cryptids. It was like the
Mm,
United States of cryptids. So it was cryptids in America, and it was divided into the different regions and the cryptids in that region. But this is all these different cursed objects, and they all have they're illustrated. Like he has one on the
wow.
Hope Diamond
Nice.
and Annabelle and Jeffrey the doll, but also James
Jeffrey the
Dean's.
doll. What's
Let's
Jeffrey
see,
the
did I get
doll?
it right? Robert the doll.
I don't
Robert
know
the
that one
doll.
either. Who's Robert the doll? Are they all cursed?
I think
Wow.
Robert the doll is like the one that's pretty big and he's like in a rocking chair, like in an
Oh
Airbnb, and people
no.
say they hear the rocking chair move.
That's no.
Um,
That's like Woman in Black.
no, yeah, that's absolutely
Oh.
getting into that territory. But he also has like a chapter or a little like few page listing on James Dean's Porsche Spider and like the Rudolph Valentino ring, Tutankhamun's tomb. So it's a pretty expansive list of like what in popular culture and imagination we consider to be like a cursed object and a few lesser known, not quite as infamous objects. And there's a whole section on graves, like tombs that are cursed and stuff. So it was pretty interesting
That sounds great.
to
I feel
read.
like he's tapped into something there. Like he's given us the gift that we didn't realize we wanted or needed, but that's beautiful. He's got his blog, right? Is it Otis? Odd Things I've Seen.
That sounds familiar. I remember when we did one of his books, my old co-host Rachel mentioned that yeah, he had a blog.
And he actually goes and sees these things himself. Like he's kind of an
Mhm.
avid collector.
Yeah, 'cause I know for our Halloween episode, I did one of his books where he lived in Salem for like the whole month of October, and it was his like kind of travelogue memoir, Salem in October experience.
I want his life. That sounds amazing. That's like, those people who are like, I'm going to go and live in Argentina for a year. I'm like, okay, I, that's amazing. I wish I could do that as well.
I would like to pitch a story where I spend a summer in Fiji, and I just really write
Yeah.
about
It's really
what it's like.
spooky.
So, needless to say, I would say that's pretty room temperature. It's more of a reference guide than anything, but it's a pretty fun read, and he's a funny guy. Like, there's illustrations and little jokes and quotes, but you'll learn a lot of fun facts that you can drop at a dinner party and be like, "Did you know?
That's
Here's a cursed
cursed.
object fact for you." So that is Cursed Objects by J.W. Oker.
Awesome. My final book is The Woven Path by Robin Jarvis. And so this is what he says. Robin Jarvis says, that in almost every legend or myth there is usually a magical device involved, whether it be a cloak of invisibility or an enchanted sword, but you never know what happens to those objects when the story is over. The Wyrd Museum, Wyrd is spelled W-Y-R-D, Wyrd, is where they end up. All the supernatural trinkets are kept there, safely away from the ordinary world, yet the strangest and perhaps most deadly elements are the three old ladies who live there. This book was published in 1995. It's the first book in the Tales from the Wyrd Museum trilogy, and it follows 11-year-old Neil, who moves into the museum with his father, who has got a job there as a caretaker. But the museum is owned by these three ancient sisters who have some spectacular secrets that are only revealed in book 2, which is called The Raven's Knot. And this book
Interesting.
is like, I can't overstate how influential this book was on me as just like a young reader. It's just so dark and weird and fascinating and sort of like meticulous. There are so many. As a trilogy, it's perfect. He just drops hints all over the place about what's going to happen throughout the series, and the thing that ties it all together is this place, this separate collection in the museum, which is filled with all these spooky objects. There are shrunken human heads. There's the heel bone of Achilles. There's a black box containing the demon Belial. And there's a teddy bear who is wearing a pair of dog tags because he contains the soul of a dead American airman from the Second World War. And so the first book sees Neil get sucked into a portal, sent back in time to the Second World War to help this teddy bear try to save his friends during the Blitz in London. And at the same time, the box containing the demon Belial gets sucked into the portal as well, and it's just like runs havoc on Londoners.
Ah.
Yeah. It's so
Oh,
unique. It's
wow.
so weird. It's so different. It kind of incorporates lots of different types of mythology. And yeah, it's just brilliant. I just love it. I really recommend it. I would probably say, technically it's like nowadays you'd say it's in the middle of middle grade and YA. But
Mhm.
back in the day it was just called children's fiction. But that doesn't mean that it's not, really quite scary in places. Like the demon Belial, it basically, if memory serves, it's sort of a bit of a fear demon. So it appears as the things that the character fears. And there's one section where there's one of the Londoners. She runs this like make do and mend class, which was like a wartime thing where stocks of things were really low, so you just had to stitch
Yeah.
together blankets and all that kind of stuff. And she gets killed by the demon impersonating Adolf Hitler, whose claws become knitting needles. It's like really quite disturbing.
Ooh. Yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
it's very cool.
Sounds
That was The Woven Path by Robin Jarvis. And I'd put it in the freezer if I was a younger reader, but grown-ups can probably handle it now, I'd say.
Yeah, like someone coming at me with knitting needle hands would traumatize me as a child, for
Yeah.
sure.
You don't need
Uh,
that.
I don't, and you really did stick to a 90s theme. I love it.
Yeah, completely by accident.
I love it. Must have been just a big heyday for cursed object stories.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I always like to ask guests on the show is for a chilling obsession. So, what is something you've been enjoying in horror lately?
I'm completely obsessed with a TV series called Yellow Jackets. Have you
Yes.
seen it?
Yes.
Uh,
I
I'm
love it.
okay, halfway through season 2, so
Mhm.
I'm,
No
I'm not caught
spoilers.
up, but it's so good. I love it. I love all the characters. I love how it's, a female driven narrative completely. I love all the actors in it. I think Christina Ricci has been just dying to have a role like this for about 15 years, and she just absolutely kills it. Juliette Lewis, love her. Goes without saying that Melanie Linsky is amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just think it's so fantastic. I love it.
I feel like they did such a great job casting the younger actors and then the adult versions of themselves. And I also love that almost all the adult actors were working in the 90s. So it's like
Yes.
familiar faces.
Yeah, it's so clever. Yeah. Did you? So I thought, I don't know if they did this purposefully, but it's something that kind of tricked me in a nice way. In the very first episode of season one, I felt like they were kind of playing around with the audience's expectations of who the grown-up actors were playing and who their younger counterparts were. And
I
so for the
think
longest
so.
time, I thought that Jackie was going to be Christina Ricci. And so when it turned out it was actually Misty, it was just like, hell yeah, like so great.
I think so. I think they did kind of like leave that open. Well, I watched it with my mom. I watched season 1 when it came out, and then my mom came to visit me a few months ago, and we watched all of season 1 and like half of season 2 before she had to go home. And I just remember her being so stressed out. She's like, "Well, who plays adult this character?" And I'm like, maybe they haven't been introduced yet."
Yeah,
She's like, we haven't seen that person in the future timeline." And I'm like,
yeah.
"Well, either they died or they haven't been introduced yet. So those are your two options."
Yeah, I love that she needs to know.
You will get
Oh.
your answer to that. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that show. Good pick. But the second tradition we have on the show is to ask our guests for a final girl song.
This has been so difficult. I've been absolutely killing myself trying to find just one. Can I have like one that is sort of like like a lyrical song and one that isn't?
Sure.
um, okay, so if it's just like a regular song, it has to be Edge of 17 by Stevie Nicks because it's magical. I
I
love
feel like
her.
it's got the build up. Yeah, like it's got that perfect like revving yourself up for something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like it's so evocative. It's got such a specific mood to it. You know, it's sort of
Mhm.
it could be a bit spooky. You know, maybe I'm fighting um ghosts or something. You know. And just Stevie Nicks, you know, whenever you're in trouble, just invoke the name of Stevie Nicks and she will come and help you. I
Yeah,
truly believe that.
she will.
Yeah.
I do believe that. She has that vibe.
She knows when you're in trouble. Okay, this is my like naughty, cheeky sort of like extra one. Um, and it's Blue Monday by Sebastian Böhm. It's a cover of is it Orgy who did the original, I think. Like they did like a really rock version. And then this is like a cover by Sebastian Böhm. And the reason I know it is because it was in a TV series called The Traitors, which was, I don't know if you guys have it over there yet, but
Um,
it's like a game show, but like the coolest, most horror infused game
is it the
shows.
one in the castle one?
Yes.
Okay, then yes, it is on. I think it's on Peacock or something, and everyone says it's really good. So I
Oh
will.
God.
You're
You're
you're endorsing it too?
Yes, yes, 1,000
Okay,
times yes. It's one of the best things I've ever seen. Genuinely. Like it is so good. And it's
perfect.
like even though it's sort of kind of reality TV and even though it's technically a game show, they get the perfect story. Like the last episode is just so perfect. I don't know how they did it, but it's
Okay.
fantastic. And it has the most amazing soundtrack. And it includes Blue Monday by Sebastian Böhm, which is just this freaking badass orchestral. You want to walk down the street in slow mo, cut to hell, covered in bandages, torn clothing. You know, you survived, and that's your song.
Love that. Okay, so I will be Adding that to the playlist and checking out, is it The Traitors or just Traitors?
The Traitors.
The Traitors. Okay.
Yeah.
I will be checking it out. I have had people tell me it's good, and it did sound good.
It's so good. It's like, do you guys have the game Werewolf? It's like a party game.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's basically that, but
Interesting.
on a big
Okay.
budget. And like over a period of weeks, you know, these people are stuck in this castle for ages and they get really worn down. Yeah, check it out. It's so good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me about cursed objects.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been so, so fun.
It has been fun. Where can people find you online?
I'm on Twitter at Josh Winning, and I'm on Instagram as Joshua Winning. I'm kind of on TikTok, but not really. But you can find me on there as Goblin Author because I thought I would shake things up.
Oh.
My website is joshuawinning.com.
Sounds good. And then everyone should check out Burn the Negative for cursed object goodness. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter or X at Books Freezer Pod and on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and I believe Blue Sky as Books in the Freezer. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes are at booksinthefreezer.com, where you will find links to all of the books mentioned in this and previous episodes, as well as links on different ways to support the podcast, including links to merch, affiliate links, and links to the Patreon. So if that interests you, check that out at booksinthefreezer.com. I'm Stephanie. You can find me on Twitter at lady_Gagnon. That's LADY_GAGNON. Or on Instagram at That's What She Read. And that's with 2 A's. See you next time on Books in the Freezer.